Not that anyone asked, but I have to use the handheld mic because if I use a lav mic, my beard gets all up in it and makes noises. So, and every audio guy I've ever worked with said, "Oh, we'll just clip it onto your beard." Nah, we're not doing that.
Great. Okay, thank you for bearing with me with IT problems. Let's talk about exfiltration. So, a little bit of who I am. My name is Federico Cedolini. I'm originally from Argentina, but I'm currently working in Boston as a consultant for Aon, delivering Stross Friedberg in digital forensics and incident response services. We're a global consulting firm working on a range of complex cases going from business email compromise all the way to ransomware and assisting in with digital investigations that involve any type of digital equipment. Some interest within digital forensics in cybersecurity. I really find I have a deep interest in cloud forensics, Microsoft 365. That is going to be a little bit this particular talk. And then getting a little bit into malware analysis and security automations because I hate doing things twice. Outside of work, I love gaming, hiking, and sailing. I have a picture to prove that I do indeed go outside. So what are we going to be talking about today? Here's our agenda. First, we're going to talk about exfiltration in business email compromise in general. Then we're going to deep dive into a particular method of exfiltration that is OAuth applications that we consistently see threat actors use in different investigations and account takeovers. Then we're going to talk about some specific applications that we consistently see in these investigations and how to find them in your environment. To finally talk about some prevention mechanisms, things that you can do to prevent some of these exfiltration with OAuth applications, and then just after you guys are tired of hearing me talk, we're going to talk about the takeaways. So let's just dive right into this. Business email compromise. For this talk, we're going to start with the assumption that the threat actor has been able to get access to your account in M365. I hope you guys had a chance to attend to this excellent talk gave by my colleague Rachel. She talked about different ways of phishing. We're gonna start after that. The threat actor has already gained access to our account. So to talk about exfiltration in business email compromise, specifically in Microsoft 365, we need to understand what data lives within Microsoft 365. And we know that our data has value. And by design, by mistake, or on purpose, this data lives in different places within Microsoft 365 services, and it lives in these places in a few different ways, in a few different formats. One of the common ones is you can find files in your OneDrives, in your SharePoint. This can be your client list. This can be sensitive documents. They can be regular day-to-day documents. And they are going to be mainly focused on your OneDrive. And then we have another section where there is a lot of sensitive data for the users in your organizations. And this is the mailbox of each of the users and those shared mailboxes that we find across the organization. So, but what actually is within these mailboxes? And we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the mailbox because there is more there than what you may think. So, just in general, in a mailbox, you can find all your email messages between your internal teams. You can find messages with your client, your vendors, sensitive information. Something that the threat actors we consistently see go after is that wire information, those invoices. These email messages are going to have attachments. Many of them are going to have attachments, also containing sensitive information. And then something that you may not think exactly as having a lot of value or maybe being something meaningful is your address book. Those people who you are talking to in a day-to-day basis or that you talked years ago. That contact information also lives within your mailbox. And for threat actors, that has some value. And we're going to dive a little bit on that. So what happens if the threat actors actually get access to this sensitive information and let alone exfiltrate it for offline use? So there can be a few consequences. It can result on triggering statuses and regulations that may require your organization to notify different organizations, different individuals. It can also result in more elaborated phishing campaigns. The more information the threat actor has, the more effectively they can target your clients, your vendors. And there can be also some reputational damage for the company. But this aside, it's really business focused, but you don't have to forget that at the end of the day, information that can be leaked can be part of somebody else's life, social security numbers and things like that, and it can result on impact in individuals as well. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the mailboxes, because that's going to be a big part of where our information lives, by purpose or by mistake. So the anatomy of a mailbox. Each user, generally in M365, is going to have a regular user is going to have a mailbox associated to them. So this used to be Bob. If you attended a few presentations earlier in the morning, you're going to notice that Bob was killed by somebody else. So HR sent us Juan. Meet Juan. Anyway, Juan has a mailbox. So what are the different parts of this mailbox? What lives within this particular mailbox? And as we mentioned, we're going to have all these email messages that are going to contain all the header information, all the actual contents, and that could be or not sensitive information. We have the attachments. We have the context information. So what else is in here? And this is in your primary mailbox, that central mailbox that you use day to day. What else is within your mailbox in M365? Your mailbox audit log, which seems strange that the log tracking the activity for your mailbox actually lives within your mailbox. And there are a folder called recyclable items, recoverable items, sorry. And the mailbox audit log is going to be tracking activity that happens in your mailbox. Depending on the license, how much you're paying for Microsoft, as things happen. You're going to get different level of logins, but you can find activities such as sending messages, creating new messages, deleting, and things like that. So what else is connected to your M365 mailbox? There is this thing called in-place archive, which is an additional mailbox that an admin can set up for you that is basically for archiving all their emails. For many people who have been 1 or 2 years within the organization, they may not have anything here. But if you had been 10 years, for example, in our organization, this can be a very large amount of your data. And why is this important to mention that there is an in-place archive, which is a separate mailbox that can be connected? Because different applications, different exfiltration methods interact differently with this particular in-place archive. Because by design, it's a separate mailbox. So one of the objectives of business email compromise investigation is going to try to identify what data is at risk, what data the threat actor was able to exfiltrate. So we have the primary user that was compromised. But this particular user, something you need to consider is that in many situations, they have access to other mailboxes. This could be a sales mailboxes, just a general IT mailbox that this user has delegated access to. So when you are reviewing your logs and trying to review the data that may have been at risk during an incident, you need to consider that it may be more than just the main account of the user, and it may expand to other mailboxes. Perfect. So now we understand what data lives within the mailbox. We know that we had files in OneDrive, SharePoint. So how do we get it out? So there are different ways you can do this depending how you're feeling that day. So going by personalities, the first one is the persistent. You can go, Microsoft through the online interface allows you to go email by email, file by file, and just clicking around, you can download every single one by one. So if you're very persistent, you can actually get every single file. So if you're a Microsoft fan, if you really like Microsoft products, Microsoft has many different software that you can use in a day-to-day basis that are not necessarily designed for exfiltration, but it's a side effect. For example, if you use OneDrive for desktop, you can download your files. If you use Outlook for desktop, which is a really good exfiltration tool, you can download all the emails because Outlook for desktop will create a file as soon as you log in, and it's going to start downloading all those emails. If you're not feeling like taking all things and you just want to get anything new that is coming into a mailbox, you can set inbox rules, or you can set the mailbox configuration to actually forward new messages to an account that is under your control. But the one that I really like, and we're going to be diving more into, is OAuth applications. And we're going to dive into what OAuth applications are in just a little bit. But it's a good way to get a bulk of data exfiltrated. Depending on your knowledge on this particular topic, you may also reference to this particular mailbox exfiltration as mailbox synchronization in many times. So in the industry, you may find those terms sometimes being interchanged. Cool. So let's talk about OAuth applications. What are OAuth applications? So to understand what OAuth applications are, we need to talk about what OAuth is. And it stands for Open Authorization, which is not the same as Open Authentication. Open Authentication is part of the workflow of an OAuth application, but it's not the main focus. But the authentication piece is that it allows you to consent another application to access data hosted in another system on your behalf. So you're giving consent to this other application, but you're not giving them your credentials. It's all purely on token-based authentication. So it's a little bit more of a secure way of authorizing an application to access your data without having to expose your credentials. Something interesting about this particular, about OAuth is that part of the protocol is that you need to define the scope of permissions that you are granting the application. When you consent to an application, you're going to have a list of permissions that this particular application is going to be accessing on your behalf, and you're going to have a list of activity it can take on your behalf. So, what applications, and you may have seen them as sign in with. Sometimes you see us sign in as Facebook, sign in with your Google Gmail account. Many times you see it with your Microsoft 365. So, not all OAuth applications are bad. OAuth applications are a key component of today's business. For many organizations, they expand either the productivity or the day-to-day tasks that a person do. So they add different layers of complexity when looking at what they can actually do. And we're going to dive into a few examples. So how do we identify an OAuth application? Each OAuth application is going to have different aspects in the logs that we're going to be reviewing. One of the main things is going to be the application ID. It's a string of numbers and layers that is going to be unique for that application. It's going to be the same application ID across tenants. So in my environment, it's going to be the same ID as in your tenant or in your tenant. Then there's going to be application display name. This can be modified, or this can be modified, but it's going to be part of the application registration. And most legitimate applications will keep it constant. And then we're going to have the user agent and the client info string that are basically a string of text that is describing the underlying technology that is being used to access or perform a specific task. And this is going to come into play in just a few slides when we're looking at specific examples. OK. Let's talk about some of the most common OAuth applications that we see and how to handle them in your M365 environment. So in order to be able to identify an OAuth application in your environment, you're going to have about 3 main sources of information in Microsoft 365. One of those is going to be the application registration page. Here, you can go into your Microsoft Entra ID portal and go to Identity, Applications, Enterprise Application. You're going to have a list of all the applications in your environment. Here, you're going to be able to see a few different things, like what users have consented and given permissions to this application, who is using such application, what people may be signing in, or what changes may be taken to this particular application. So this is going to be good for identifying that the application is being used within your environment. Another thing that we're going to be using is the unified audit log. This is one of Microsoft's main logs, and here's a list of some of the events that are going to be one of our main focus when you're doing an investigation, a BC investigation, to look out for. So including sign-in events or consent to application type of events is going to give you a hint of what applications are being granted access to and who is logging into them. A very interesting one, and it's going to be key when we talk about some of the applications, is the mail items access events. This basically is an event that gets triggered when in a few different scenarios, but basically it's going to tell you what items in your mailbox are being accessed by a user or an application. And then, as we talked earlier, there is also the mailbox audit log that is going to contain similar events, some of them not enabled by default. Okay, so let's talk about some of the apps that we regularly are seeing threat actors use, what they are legitimately used for, and how threat actors use it. So one of them is going to be EM Client. EM Client is an email desktop client. You can think as very similar to Outlook Desktop, in which you're going to be able to log in. You're going to get a copy of your emails. You're going to be able to send emails, receive emails, set inbox rules, things like that. So EM Client can work on Windows, on Windows and Mac mainly. And I was playing with it 2 days ago. It has added some interesting AI features that can help you with tagging and replying. So I'm going to be playing a little more with it to see if we can use it for phishing. So some interesting things. When the threat actors use this particular application can be with the focus of trying to exfiltrate data. Why? Because when you're logging into this application, it's going to explicitly ask you what data you want to take. It's going to say, do you want to take all your email messages? Do you want to include attachments with it? You just want to make it available online or if you want to have offline access. So threat actors using this application is going to have a few different effects on the user mailbox and in the delegated mailboxes that the user has access to. So for the main user, the default behavior is going to allow you to download all the email messages, including attachments. Something interesting is that the in-place archive, that extra mailbox, is not going to get downloaded by default. So you have a smaller data set that you could be concerned about in the default behavior. For delegated mailboxes, it has the ability to download it, but it's not going to be the default behavior. But you still need to watch out and review the logs for those specific users if you know that your compromised user has access to those mailboxes. So how can we identify activity related to this particular application? So I have the application ID here. It's going to be in your application registration page. It's also available online. But it's going to allow you to track some of the activity for this particular application in your unified audit log and in your mailbox audit log. Some other two interesting things are the client info strings, and these are specific for your mail items access events. If you see here, it actually mentions EM clients on the description of each EM client. But you may be wondering, why are there two if it's for the same event? The second one is going to be for your in-place archive. And it's going to change, the numbers are going to change a little bit based on what version of EM client they're using. But something interesting about the in-place archive is that when you're looking at the IP information, one of the factors that we use to determine if an activity may be malicious or suspicious or just normal user behavior, you're going to notice that the in-place archive access with this distinct client info string is actually going to be coming from Microsoft. Instead of the other string that is going to be pointing to the actual IP that the threat actor is using, that generally is a VPN or a proxy or some other type of VMs. Because the in-place archive is being accessed in a different way than your regular mailbox, the internal Microsoft systems are resolving the IP as an internal Microsoft IP. So something you need to consider when reviewing what data may have been at scope during exfiltration with EM client. Then your next application is ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo, it's basically a platform that provides users with access to contact information of company profiles, and it can be used for market research, potential customer outreach, and then to create a targeted list of clients, which is very valuable information for many companies. And for threat actors, they can use this list to target specific people directly on more elaborate phishing campaigns. For this particular, because it's exfiltrating your address book, there isn't much information, much login within Microsoft. And you will see a consent application for that particular user, and you will see a successful login when it happens. But there won't be much else indicating that actually the address book was exfiltrated. So what's next? Probably my favorite exfiltration tool. I'm yet to see this tool being used legitimately by any of the clients that we had worked with. But basically, Perfect Data Software. This tool is marketed as an email backup tool for many types of email providers, such as Gmail, Microsoft 365 in this case. So an email backup tool, aka a very good exfiltration tool. And a very particularly scary one when you start to dig into it. So let's walk by what happens when the user actually successfully logs into this application. For the main user, when you log into the application, it's going to give you a list of all the folders that you have in your mailbox, and you can do check all, and you get a nice little PST file that contains all your emails, all your files. And this will include your in-place archive, extending by a lot what may be in scope when you compare with other applications such as EM Client. For your delegated mailboxes, Perfect Data Software cannot download your delegated mailboxes by default. You probably noticed there is a little star over there, because in this weird scenario in which your user happened to be an admin being compromised, and the threat actor is really willing to take everything they can grant what's called application impersonation to the account that they compromise, allowing the Perfect Data Software to exfiltrate every single mailbox in your organization, which can result in a lot of data going out the door. So, a very scary one. It doesn't happen often because your regular user, it's not going to be an admin in exchange to be able to assign this particular role. But it has the capability. And when you're using Perfect Data Software, it's going to ask you if you're an admin. And if you're not, it's going to give you a little description, a little link that is going to take you to the video with the steps that you need to take to grant consent to every single mailbox, basically. Some of the events to watch out for when one admin is compromised in your unified audit log are this, that basically are pointing to a new role within Microsoft Exchange being assigned. Perfect. So, IOCs, indicators of compromise. Here's our application ID. One of my favorite things when we just get access to a client environment during a base investigation, while we are collecting the data, I go into their application to see if this is there. I'm yet to see it being used legitimately. So same deal as before, we have two different client info strings. But these are a little bit different because we don't see Perfect Data Software being mentioned anywhere. So if you're not keeping track of, if you're not really paying attention of the app ID that's being used to access the email, you may be missing this and confusing this as a regular browser access, which generally doesn't result on the exfiltration of those mailboxes. Okay, those are some of the 3 OAuth applications that we consistently see almost in every other case, but there are a few others that you can see here, such as newsletter software supermailer that is being used for sending phishing emails, CloudSponge for address book exfiltration, another Fastmail for mailbox exfiltration, and rclone can be connected also as an OAuth application to exfiltrate your files. Worth mentioning, but we don't see it as often. So something that we see a little bit less often in a regular business email compromise are OAuth applications created by threat actors. My colleague covered a few of the cases in which threat actors use this. They are less commonly seen, but the capabilities of these OAuth applications are basically whatever the threat actor is able to imagine and code. Because every other thing that an OAuth application can do, a third-party OAuth application, they can also code it to do it as well. So what can we do about these ones? You should regularly be looking at the list of your OAuth applications in your environment, and specifically the permissions. Threat actors will usually target high privilege permissions that will allow them to do as much as possible. So how do you look at the permissions? You find the application registration in your Microsoft Entra ID. You find the specific application page, and then there's a section for permissions. And within the same registration, you're going to see who has consented to it. OK, I've been talking for a while. Let's just talk about preventions, and let's take it away. So you're an admin. Your organization uses Microsoft 365. What can you do to prevent exfiltration with OAuth applications? And you're going to be surprised that there is some very easy steps that you can take to prevent this. Oops. Perfect. You can enable what's called admin consent workflow within Entra ID, which is basically preventing your users from registering a new OAuth application, to consenting to a new OAuth application without the permissions of an administrator that you define. This can be selected admins, or they can be a group. You get the options within, you will be surprised, the Microsoft Entra ID portal. Again, same area with your application registrations. There is a section for consent and permissions, and you have different sections in which you can decide what users are able to consent to applications, what permissions you consider low privilege, high privilege, and what admins should be allowed to consent to approve this request. So by doing this, you also prevent something very interesting that Rachel covered during her talk about phishing, which is phishing through OAuth applications. Because the user is not able to grant access to a third-party application without consent, the threat actor is not able to get initial access with OAuth applications this way. Something that you should be also doing regularly is looking at the OAuth applications in your environment. Sometimes threat actors, when creating their own, will try to hide them in plain sight. For example, they could call an application Office 365 and change the O for a 0, and just get as much privilege as they can within it. OK, so this doesn't look like much you can do to prevent exfiltration other than preventing users from registering OAuth applications. But we talked at the beginning that these are not the only methods for exfiltration. So brainstorming with some friends about what's the best way to prevent exfiltration in your M365 environment. Who wants to take a guess? A friend came with a very funny answer that was, just don't get compromised, which sounds easier said than done, because environments can be very complex. Phishing are getting very elaborated. So some of the things you can do to prevent getting compromised in general is making sure that MFA is enabled for all the users, which hopefully all your organizations do. When possible, make sure that you have Microsoft registered devices in your environment. If you have strong conditional access policies, implementing geofencing and locking down service accounts can be a good step in the right direction. Combining conditional access policies with Microsoft Entra join devices has been one of the most effective methods, but one of the most restricted as well. Reviewing your email environment, making sure that your users can report phishing when they see it. Disabling external forwarding to making sure that threat actors are not able to set up rules to forward emails outside of your organization. And then also limiting the number of recipients of emails to try to contain phishing. And finally, show some account management, making sure that Regularly audit your user accounts. If somebody has left the organization, make sure that account gets disabled and removed as needed. Make sure that your admins have separate accounts, and limit the number of your admin accounts. I had work cases where there are 35 different global admins. Believe me, you don't need 35 global admins. So let's take it away so we can go get some cookies. So takeaways. I want you guys to leave here with 4 things. The first one, OAuth applications are key pieces for business today. They are key components of organizations, and they are valuable tools for your organization. But they are also valuable tools for the threat actors. OAuth applications are not the only method of exfiltration, but it's a method that we consistently see threat actors use. So they should be audited regularly. Usage of OAuth applications by the threat actor can result in a very large amount of data leaving your organization, resulting on many of the effects that we talked earlier about notification requirements and impacting people's lives. And the last one is that you as an admin, M365 admin, you can take steps to prevent exfiltration with OAuth applications, with just a few simple steps. And Microsoft has a decent documentation on how to do this. Perfect. So if you're looking to get more into understanding business email compromise, you should, or if you want to get inspired by some of the work that we do, or you're just curious of what we're writing, what interesting trends we're seeing, here are some of the highlighted blog posts, and at the end, the main, our main website where we're consistently getting new blog posts out. And that's all. Thank you. Here's our Twitter account. Yes.
We have a couple minutes for like 2 questions. So does anybody have any questions? All right, I'm coming back to you.
Hey, Federico, great talk. One thing I was going to ask you, and it's a project that I'm aware of that people use. It's called Hawk. It's a PowerShell-based audit tool for M365 and O365. So anybody who's not using it, I absolutely would say it's a great way to do threat hunting. But do you know of any other good resources you can use to look for abuse of these types of things for organizations that might not necessarily have, like, you know, a security budget to have people to do additional threat hunting and detection?
That's a great question. So other resources you can use to threat hunt within your environment. Many times, so Hawk is a great tool. What other tools you can use? Something that we regularly see with some of the clients is that they don't know what actually comes with their M365 license. Many don't know that they have solutions such as Microsoft Defender for Cloud or Microsoft Defender for Office included within their subscription. And that's a very good one for hunting down OAuth applications. There is a connector that you can set for your for tracking all the OAuth applications. It's going to give you a nice overview of what OAuth apps are within your environment, the risk of the permissions that they have. There is another one, I think it's called AppTotal, that has a list of OAuth applications that you can track it by the application ID. It's going to tell you what permissions is expected to have, and you can compare it that way. But that's a way to get started.
Any other questions? All right.
Cool.
Thank you so
Thank you, everybody.
much.